Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final webinar of this round of Bard Education's Speech of the Week. My name is Mary Hartman, and I'm Director of Education at Bard on the Beach Shakespeare Festival. We created this program as a way to connect and create in this virtual space when we can't gather in person. But I love the fact that we are still gathering. And as we do, I'd like to invite you to take a moment, wherever you are, to appreciate where you are and to acknowledge the history, culture, and spirit of that place. We at Bard on the Beach are on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We are grateful to be here, and we are grateful for the opportunity to gather with all of you. If you would like to access live captioning during this webinar, you can click on the CC at the bottom right of your screen. You click on that, you can select show subtitle or hide subtitle as you choose. Speech of the Week is brought to you by Bard Education, and our mission is to inspire community through dynamic, engaging experiences of Shakespeare. I'd like to thank Katie Johnstone, Melanie Heatler, Ria Schroff, and the rest of the administrative team at Bard on the Beach for helping to make this possible. I would also like to thank the sponsor of Speech of the Week, and that is Blue Shore Financial, for their generous support. And I am so delighted to introduce this week's special guest artist, Praneet Akilla. And Praneet is an Indian-Canadian actor and producer. Born in Mumbai, India, and immigrating to Canada at the age of 9, he discovered his love for storytelling and performance art after years of training in Indian classical music and immersing himself into old Bollywood movies. Though he pursued a chemical engineering degree at McGill University and worked as an engineer for 2 years, he always wanted to pursue acting. While analyzing water filtration systems by day, he would act in several community theater productions at night, secretly practicing his monologues in stairwells or empty parking lots at work. After finally deciding to quit his job and to follow his passion, he has in short order performed in lead roles with major theater companies across Canada. Most recently, he was in Cypher at the Arts Club Theatre Company, Iceland at Theatre Calgary. He was a company member in Coriolanus at Bard on the Beach, and the Penelopiad at the Grand Theatre in London, Ontario. Praneet has played quite a few roles in the Shakespeare canon as well, most recently Brutus in Coriolanus, Edmund in King Lear, Orlando in As You Like It, and Malcolm in Macbeth. He's a 2-time Calgary Theatre Critics' Choice Award nominee and a UBCP Actor Award nominee for his role as Philip Mishra in the 2020 Netflix original series October Faction. You can next see Praneet starring in the TV series Nancy Drew on the CW and Motherland on Hulu, both coming out in 2021. And he will be performing in the ancient Indian mythology epic Mahabharata at the Shaw Festival in 2022. Welcome, Praneet. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for joining us.
And I'm so glad you've added to your no doubt already long day on set. So thank you for adding this to your evening.
No, not at all. My pleasure. My pleasure.
So just to give everybody a reminder, today is a chance to observe. So Praneet and I will chat for the next little while. We can't see you, but we know you're there and we want to answer your questions. So please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll reserve time at the end of the session to answer questions, but feel free to submit them at any time. And if we have a chance to address them as we go, we will. Remember that next Monday at 5, we'll have your chance to connect with the speech at our working session, which will be fully interactive. So we encourage everyone to join us for that. And finally, we adore seeing the videos you're submitting to these speeches. So please share your work so that we can all enjoy it. All of the details for all of the elements of Speech of the Week are on our website. So let's get on with it. Praneet, you ready to dive into this speech together?
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Beautiful. So one of our favorite things on Speech of the Week is to learn about individual actors' process as you approach Shakespeare. So Praneet, what is your normal practice when you come to a speech of Shakespeare's that's new for you?
For me, I think I start off with the what and the why. That's the first thing I need with Shakespeare, certainly in particular, because it is certainly the most, you're talking about language that's almost 400 to 500 years old now, and it's incredibly complex. And so with anything, I like to sit and think about the given circumstances that the character speaking the speech finds himself in. So that's the who and the what and the when and the where and the why and the how. And in particular with this speech, it's important for me that I, read the whole play to get a context of the world that this speech is set in. And then it gives you a sense of the character as well. And in this particular case, you have a character who is just coming from a ball where he's met this beautiful woman who he's completely infatuated with, and as his friends leave him, he's there and he sneaks in to try and see if he can get a sneak peek of her. And so for me, that's the first thing is the given circumstances of who this character is, why he's in the place where he's at, and also why is he even speaking the speech in the first place. And typically, I think maybe it's rare. Maybe some people do speak in such long chunks in their day-to-day lives. I know certainly over time that's been eroded. We don't necessarily, do that. We grunt and we oh and we ah and we even though we might be feeling all of this inside. But to me, it's important to understand what compels a person to want to say it all in one setting. And so why is very important for me. And with Shakespeare, many mentors of mine, when I've been learning the text, have previously said to me that the stakes are always high. That there is no sitting back and relaxing in Shakespeare. That it's always the threat is imminent, the danger is imminent. The love that you express is imminent. It's everything is on its toes all the time. And so for me, that's the first thing I start with is the what and the why.
And I love that in this particular speech, just before Romeo starts, Romeo asks the question, "Can I go forward when my heart is here? Mm-hmm. Turn back dull earth and find thy center out." It's almost like planetary, cosmic need to be where Juliet is. Yeah,
certainly. And the speech is, it's filled with references to planets and stars and night and day and constellations. And so and there's so it's about analyzing the reason for those, before I even get into the words necessarily. It's about the moment before and what state the character is in before these words come out of his gut, really. So
wow. And one of the things I love to invite all of our participants to do, because I love that we're able to take the speeches out of context. Although for actors, of course, when you're in a play, the context is incredibly important.
Right.
Speech of the Week gives us a chance, almost like an audition, I suppose, to take the speech out of context and just let the speech live on its own. So one of the things I delight in is inviting participants to identify for themselves, in the case of this speech, what is it that would draw your heart back to some other place, or be that center that you would revolve around like a planet does.
It's interesting for me because with this speech, we've all had crushes. We've all had that first love at first sight feeling, the feeling when that feeling sort of overwhelms you, and you're so nervous, your boots shake, you can't even get a word out. When you see the one that your heart melts every single time you see them. That feeling is universal, and for me, and as you said, I love that. I think part of that process is, after the what and the why, I certainly find, without any context or anything like that, before I even get into the lexicon of words that I don't understand or anything like that, I like to go through the speech and circle words that make me feel something. Right. So for me, and I call it substitution work, which is basically, you find words in the speech that do something to your body, that invoke a certain reaction, whether it's from your past, whether it's something that you're going through right now. And so I take my time and sort of do that, from start to from the start of the speech to the end. And for me, while I was doing it and going through the speech again, for me, the sentence that really got me is the part when he says, when he talks about, I'm trying to find it here, when he says, "Her eye discourses, I will answer it. Oh, I am too bold." And it's right away, and it's that feeling of, you're standing there and you're saying, you know what, today's the day. I'm going to talk to her, and I'm going to say something, and I'm going to confess my love for this person. And then you're in the precipice of that moment, and then you're like, you know what, no, I'm gonna walk off. No, this is stupid. This is a dumb idea. I can't believe I even thought of that. And you're talking about all this incredible, beautiful, complex language, but in fact, the one that really anchored the speech for me and the feeling that he has was that little thing, because it made it personable, it made it real, it made it harken my memories back to me being, that shy 11-year-old kid with a simple crush on this girl in a playground, and so
it's so human, isn't it? That whole
yeah completely. And that's, not only is it in the middle of the speech, but it's also the central crux. It's the anchor, that the speech is about. So I really that. For me, that's how I after the what and the why, I find just words that connect to things that relate to me personally.
I love that too, because so often with Shakespeare, we for whatever reason feel that compelled that there's some right answer that we're supposed to identify, or there's a right way to do Shakespeare. And we talk about it a lot. It's not about getting it right, it's about getting it resonant, and it's going to resonate for every individual in a different way. So I love that this is part of your practice, to just discover what resonates for you on that very personal level.
Completely, because the audience doesn't, unless they are trained Shakespeare scholars, more often than not, on average, the audience is coming into this raw, coming into this fresh, and had never seen anything like it before. And for them, it's not going to be about the knowledge of the words that'll resonate with them. It'll be about what's in here. And the universality of expressing, relatable emotions is what the audience will latch onto, and then that being said, the more hyper-specific you are to how you're connecting to the speech, the more universal it is to the audience, right?
Gosh, isn't that cool? Yeah.
Right. The more specific you are with your connection to the material, the quicker the audience will understand that.
And it is kind of related to resonance, isn't it? If we continue with that analogy, that when a tone is really clear and precise, that's when the resonance can be greatest.
Completely.
Right.
Completely.
And when it resonates for the actor, it will resonate for the audience as well, because we are sympathetic human beings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's so great.
Yeah.
So then what's next for you after you identify what connects and what resonates for you personally? What's next?
Then I go straight engineering, science brain, logic. So I flip it. So I go full 180 now, and I go line by line, and I try to understand what it means to me in contemporary English. And so this is the phase where I now go through words that I absolutely do not understand. So I get a Shakespeare lexicon or a dictionary, because though the words may seem familiar to us in the context of the time, they're completely different. And so I go line by line, pick out the words that make absolutely no sense to me, or words that I think I know, but I'm a little, iffy on, and understand what those words mean in that context. And then I literally try to make it sound like regular English to me, what a person would sound like in 2020, right? And so I go line by line, and I write it out in my own words. And I sort of found, this is not this speech, but I found like an old sort of notebook that I was doing a different Shakespeare speech on, but it's kind of like, it's very scribbled. As you can kind of see, it's kind of scribbled like this, and I have words and I have sort of markings everywhere. And then I write down sort of what it means in my own words separately. And typically, ideally what I'll do is I'll have a sheet. On one side, I'll have the actual speech. On the other side, I will notate, what they are in contemporary English. And then after that, I actually say the speech in the contemporary format first. I go through it in the contemporary style first. I don't even look at the other version. I do it just so that I know what it is in my own body as Praneet. If I was in that situation, how would I speak? How would I feel about this? And it helps me, as you said, to be more resonant, to be more specific, and to just really root myself in, in asking the questions that I ask, and root myself in the statements that I make. Why am I making those statements? And so that's basically kind of what I do next. Is I, make sure I understand all the words, and then I contemporize it. Is that a word? Contemporize? Contemporize.
Oh, yeah, I think it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
In a way, it's kind of expressing the thoughts, isn't it? Making sure the thoughts are really clear.
The thoughts are really clear, and you all have the handout as well, correct? I'm assuming at this point, yeah. And in the handout, I mean, it does a good job of, and I really appreciated that, because that's what I also do is obviously you have the punctuation given, but it's nice to kind of go through the speech and see, okay, this is where this first thought ends, and this is the beginning of a new thought, and then this is the beginning of the other thought, and this is the beginning of another thought. And I do that after I make it contemporary for me, because it's easier for me to sort of break down the thoughts first in that way, as opposed to doing it the regular way with the Shakespeare words. That's just my process and how I do it. And that's a good, clear way for me to understand, okay, like I'm going in this line for this thought, and then I go this way and I come back to it, or I go off in a different direction, so that it's not all one giant run-on sentence, so that I know for myself, the train of thought and where he's trying to get to, to express himself. So yeah, that's the next step, I would say.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the fun things about that is then, when those thoughts are clear, you can see the difference between one of those really complex thoughts that goes kind of all over the place, and something like, I am too bold.
Yeah.
Just 4 words, incredibly drastic.
Incredibly drastic. And of course there are those, those clues in the text of the semicolons and the colons, and, when there's an exclamation mark, there's a completely drastic new thought that follows it. There are certain clues that I've learned over the years, certainly. But for me, I think, as you said, I think it's important to make it personal for myself. So the way I do that is to understand, and also, like, a big thing is there's this need, when you think Shakespeare and theater and all this thing, there's this need to make it grand and bold, and and to make it loud. And I used to do that, and certainly that's sort of the instinct when you first look at something like this. But really, it's a boy expressing, his love, and for this beautiful girl that he's trying to, and that he doesn't know how to come to terms with it yet. That's all it really is. And so, it makes it easier to, once you know the what and the why, and you contemporize it for yourself, to find the thought process.
So Praneet, we've had a request from one of the attendees that you could maybe give a little example of how you might express a part of the speech in your 2020 language.
Yeah.
Just a little snippet would be really great.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's think. What's a good example here? Let's do an example here. So, from maybe, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, are far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. So we'll do that little section there. And for me, if you actually, let's make it 2020 language here. He's saying, when he says it is the east and Juliet is the sun, and he's now comparing Juliet the sun to the jealous moon. And he's saying, rise up, beautiful sun, and kill that jealous moon, because that jealous moon is sick and pale with grief because of you, because you, Juliet, are more beautiful than the moon. Right? And right away, and it's, and he's that accusatory nature, of you're jealous of her? Yeah, don't be jealous of this person. That's just the moon. Like the moon's going to continue to be, jealous and filled with grief, but you are infinitely more beautiful than her. So don't even bat an eye. Don't even pay attention to this, and then the next part, you're talking about her Vestal livery. I mean, Vestal livery, no idea what that meant before, right? So now go to the dictionary, look it up.
There's one you got to look up. Yep.
That's the one you got to look up. And it's, I mean, there's many roots to those words, but ultimately to me, he's talking about virginity there. And he says, virginity makes her look sick and green. And he wants to cast off. He says, only fools hold on to their virginity, let it go. And then suddenly, right there after letting it go, it's back to, oh my God, it's my lady. Oh my God, she's there. Oh, if she only knew how much and so I think, I mean, I use the word attitude in this sense, but when you look at it that way, when you talk about, rise up, beautiful sun, and kill the jealous moon, the moon is already pale and sick with grief because you, Juliet, her maid is way more beautiful than the moon. If you were to describe somebody like that in 2020 right now, and you were making an argument about that, think of the tone, think of the tonality, think of the attitude that you'd have, think of the way you'd say that sentence, in describing somebody, or trying to tell somebody that, if somebody came up to you and said, oh, like I feel like I'm ugly or whatever, I don't look the right way and stuff, and you're trying to convince your friend that, no, you know what, you're beautiful, that you're not the same as this thing, So that's to me, I looked at that, and that's how it sort of came across in my head. It was me trying to defend, my best friend, against, the moon in this case, but like you can pick whatever you want in your substitution work to help you, figure it out. So that's
beautiful, because I love that idea of substitution work, because, for each of us to really bring the speech to life when we're doing the speech out of context, when we're in a production, of course,
sure.
there is a Juliet, there is a director to help tell this whole story, all of that. But just during the speech, I think it's wonderful for each individual to just have whatever it is that inspires you absolutely in mind as Juliet for you. And that's going to be different for every single person.
Completely.
And here's kind of I'd love to hear what you think about this, because we have a question about if you prefer it if your scene partner reacts and so forth. But one of the interesting things about the speech in my book is I think sometimes the modern editors don't help us out, because the modern editors will have Juliet enter before this speech begins. And I don't think that's in the text.
Nope.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you agree with me.
I agree with you.
In the text, isn't it? You say, arise, you say, it is the east. Oh, there's the light. Yeah, it's the east, and Juliet is the sun. So it's all this amazing imaginative fantasy metaphor, of, oh my gosh. So imagine this, everybody, that there's the east, Juliet's the sun. Come on, sun, rise. I want to see the sun, right? And Juliet's the sun. So I think it's really important that Juliet's not even there at this point.
No. And he says, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks. He doesn't say what person through yonder window breaks, or he doesn't say, what light through yonder window breaks. It's the hope that she will appear. That propels him to keep saying, what light through yonder window breaks. He asked the question, what is that light? Because if Juliet's appeared there already, it disables any sort of curiosity that he has that compels him to say the next few words. Right.
And then there's that moment of it is my lady. Oh, it is my love.
Yes.
It's so much more dynamic and exciting. And can you believe it? She's
Completely.
Actually there.
I remember when I did this on stage in university, I remember the way we were, and again, I think of course each production is different. It's context varies based on what the director wants and sort of the tone of the production. But I remember in ours, Juliet didn't appear. until cast it off. And then she appears, and I was fully out in the open, and I went and I ducked behind bushes. Like I ran as soon as I saw her, and I was just like, oh, okay, she's there. Okay, what do I do now? Okay, all right, okay. You know what? All right, okay, let's gather the courage, and then I will go do this. Nope, going back to the bush. So if she's there off the top, it gets rid of all of that play, and all of that discovery, So yes, I'm with you 100%. She does not appear until that point.
Awesome. And then let's just think through for a second. So then how many lines does it take before you, Romeo, actually do address her? Because she talks for a while, right? So you get through all of the rest of this speech where we've ended it with, I might touch that cheek.
Yes.
And then she speaks, and then you talk for a
lot longer. Yeah. I think somewhere halfway through the next bit, because she says, me after that, I might touch that cheek. And then it's sort of halfway through or around that speech is when he finally and in fact actually he speaks, but he doesn't actually show herself to her. It's like she's aware that there's a voice, but she also doesn't know where this voice coming from. She asks, where is this?
Yeah, who is this? Yeah,
who is
man
this?
Yeah,
exactly. And he even says, he says, shall I hear more or shall I speak at this? Before then, and then he says, I take thee at thy word.
Take thee at thy word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So back to your process. What's next for you then? So you've gone through and discovered what resonates for you, and you have found a way to express the thoughts the way you would today. Mm-hmm. And then you see what happens like with the thoughts themselves. And is that where we are?
Yes. So now I've broken down the speech into my thought boxes, like the handout does. The handout does a great job of explaining that for sure. So I do the same. I have my different thought boxes, in which in each thought box, I'm calling it a thought box now.
I like that.
Within each thought box, we talk about iambic pentameter, which is, the way Shakespeare wrote certain verses, and not this whole speech. I mean, the first one certainly follows the, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. It does follow that, but not every line does. And that's okay. I struggle with that sometimes. I'm not necessarily the best at analyzing, iambic pentameter versus it not being iambic pentameter and all those things. But what iambic pentameter does help me with, the sort of the 10-syllable-esque approach to using your heartbeat to go through the words, is it does help me find the stressed words. Mm-hmm. And for me, the stressed words are a key indicator of what is important in that thought, or what is the importance that Shakespeare, like what are the words that Shakespeare really made important in those sentences. And again, that's open interpretation. Of course, there's no one right thing, but for me, it just helps. To again give a clue as to what this thought is about. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. And so I think for me, I go through the stressed and unstressed syllables within each thought pattern to give a sense of, okay, this. Now he's talking about the moon. Now he's talking about the sun, and now he's comparing the two. He's doing the antithesis. The antithetical comparison between these two objects to describe, how he feels for this woman. And so that's sort of the next step is I go through my stressed and unstressed syllables, find out what are the important words, and then again, something that I used to do as well is I would sort of speak my thought and then I'd let the thought die. And I'd speak my thought and then let the thought die. And I'd speak my other thought and I let my thought die. But these speeches that Shakespeare gives you, really, I mean, momentum is key, really. I mean, it's about going from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. There's always a build. And a great way to understand what the build is to circle the ends of each of your lines, right? Circle the ends of each of your lines. Because if you actually go through the last word of each line, it gives you a good sense of what this whole speech is about. Not literal sense, but a good sense, a fair enough sense of like, okay, this is what he's talking about. And then I circle, even the punctuations, particularly to the questions. We're so used to not asking questions anymore. Even when we ask questions, we just say, have you had dinner? And you don't
doesn't
ask.
Sound like a question.
Yeah, exactly, right. And have you had dinner? And I can guarantee you, try that next time with somebody in your life. Like, actually ask the question, and I can guarantee you it'll weird them out, because we don't ask questions anymore. They'll look once or twice and be like, is everything okay? And so it's, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. And the moment you start picking up the ends of your thoughts is when it really, really soars. And again, it's something that I have to keep practicing, because it's something I'm not great at. And so it's something I have to keep reminding myself. So once I go
how do you practice it? Like, do you do anything physical to kind of help?
I have to walk, I have to pace.
Yeah.
Back and forth. I can't sit down, I can't lie down, I can't do any of those things. I have to get on my feet. It helps me memorize. That's the way I memorize quickly, is through walking back and forth. And
do you ever find that the text changes the way you move?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening in the words will have an effect on the way that you
completely. And I get fully involved in it too. Like, I'll even sometimes I'll play like music. I'll play like music on like a speaker or something like that. And I'll just pick like a theme or whatever, and I'll play with different kinds of themes, like I'll play, like a rock song or whatever. And I'll try to do that speech from start to finish, walking back and forth, and see what that does to the rhythm of the speech. Not that, again, context is variant for each production and stuff like that, but just to help me, tackle different ways of approaching the text. I'll play like a classic violin thing, and then I'll do the speech and see what that does to the text. So I do like that a lot, but certainly for me, the key is, to really get it in my body. I have to be on my feet, I pace, I jump around, I skip around if I have to, just to get it completely physical. And to go back to what I was talking about the stakes, always being high, do 20 push-ups and then say the speech, do 20 jumping jacks and then say the speech, run around the room like 4 or 5 times and then say the speech. You'll be amazed at what that does to your body, and you'll be amazed at how you're able to carry the momentum. The out of breath actually helps, feed the urgency of what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that, because it immediately changes, kind of discombobulates everything. And it's so easy to fall into a very, very quiet, very serious, very studious, very, intellectual process, and this just opens it right up.
And in a production, you don't have to do those things, because ideally in a production, if you're the actor playing Romeo, you're already out of breath by that point, right? Like, if you're using your entire body, and which we do as actors on stage, our whole body's an instrument. And so at that point, by the time the speech begins, you're already using both your mental and physical faculties, and the 100% of it, you're using it all. So I think for me, to get used to the habit of being out of breath while I'm saying it, helps with the urgency and the momentum. Yeah.
Here's a question from an attendee. How easy is it in this speech for you to switch between passages of lofty language and Romeo's very spontaneous outbursts?
I think that comes down to, for me, it becomes easier when I've done the legwork of building my thought bubbles, right? So for me, that's where that work really begins, because I don't necessarily know if I have a good instinct to get that right off the top, right? And so for me, I get very cerebral with it. I have to break it down into what thought 1 is, what thought number 2 is, what thought number 3 is. And after I break it down, that's when I can see something like, as soon as he's very descriptive. If you look at it, right, he's very descriptive when he talks about the vestal livery and sick and green and the sun and the moon and casting it off, and oh, it is my lady, oh, it is my love, oh, that she knew she speaks, yet she says nothing, what of that, and so there's these little short sentences there, but I won't get that right off the top unless I break it down. So the end of thought number 3 for me is cast it off, and then thought number 4 begins with it is my lady. So right away, that's a textual clue for me to say, okay, now we're going this way now, and that's how I sort of break it down. So So yeah, it does seem very lofty off the top, but once you break it down into those thought bubbles, you'll also find where those spontaneous moments live within the speech.
Well, one of the fun things I found when I think about Shakespeare's really long, complex thoughts is I think it's a mistake for us to think of Shakespeare's characters as sort of thinking up a thought and then expressing it. Like we are, as human beings, the way we actually speak is we are making up our thoughts as we go along. And just for fun, I was kind of noticing, hearing you speak, Praneet, that, you know, when we get to talking the way humans talk, those thoughts are really long and complex, and they kind of meander all over the place. And that's actually the way we talk. So Shakespeare's really long, complex thoughts that meander all over the place are actually very modern and very human.
Completely. It's about thinking on the thought, right? And I'm guilty of that too as an actor, still learning and everything as well. Is you know, it's very easy to be very rehearsed with them, and you know, I will make a speech now, and this is what I have rehearsed, and this is what I'm going to say, and it's very easy to do that. But I think it's important to realize, like just the way I'm speaking right now, I have not rehearsed any of what I'm saying out of my mouth. But there is a momentum and a forward energy to it, and you can make sense of what I am saying because I am talking like this. And it's the moment where you give too much weight to each and every single word is when it drags, right? And so, so yeah, I think it's important in your speeches while you're practicing to certainly think about, you know, how do I, you know, if Romeo was searching for words, you know, what would that be like? You know, when you search for words. And there's many different clues in the text where he searches, you know, because you know he's a teenager. There's no way he's not certainly like a poet who's used to comparing metaphorical representations of what the sun and the moon and everything are, you know. So when he's saying things like "Arise, fair sun," he's thinking on the thought, right? He says, you know, "Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she," right? And so have fun with discovering, you know, him trying to figure out a word to, you know, come up with there, you know, and yeah, so many different ways to play with the text. So yeah.
Another question someone has is, when looking at a text, do you compare different versions and see the difference in punctuation and how that affects character choices? And do you even look at the first folio, or in some cases, including Romeo and Juliet, there's a first and second quarto?
I do the first time I get the speech, I do look through different renditions of it. But typically I go with the one that's in my script or the one that's been given to me. What I find and what I have found is the difference between them. Sure, there are certain punctuation differences, but on an aggregate between all the different versions of the speeches, the end result is sort of negligible, really. You know, the difference in the end result is negligible to me. I find that the approximation of whatever punctuation that is there for me does its job well. And for me as the actor, I'm not too much of a stickler on, like, I do my best to really understand and respect the punctuation as much as I can. But, you know, for me, it's more about the thought and the meaning and the stressed words and the importance of certain words to convey what I want to convey. That's more important than, oh, shoot, like, you know, there's a comma here and that derailed everything. And so I think, yeah, I
like that. I think it's really important because quite often we have no idea what Shakespeare's punctuation was, because we don't have Shakespeare's own version of these plays. What we have are editions that really, really smart people who really know what they're doing have created. But that is an interpretation, and they use the earlier versions and then the versions that were the earliest ones. But even those, you know, they're a lot of them are full of problems that are like, oh, I'm not sure that's exactly what they meant to do there. And yeah, so the punctuation is one of those things. A lot of the time it could go different ways. So I love what you're talking about as trusting your actor's instincts.
Yes,
more than an edited version, no matter what the edited version is.
No matter what the edited version is, and ultimately, even, you know, it's, I do believe in doing the homework though, right? Like ultimately, you know, if you're going to make the decision to go with what you're going with, I do like to be prepared in knowing that the decision that I'm making is the correct one for me. I'm not arrogant enough to presume that, you know, the speech that's been given to me is the only one there is, and I don't need to go research and do any other work. Like I certainly, you know, I make the decision after going through the homework and asking the questions that I need to ask, and then saying, you know what, yeah, I've done my work, but I'm going to go with this instead, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's a great example in this speech, actually. And I can't remember what the different versions are, but it's the line that is, be not her maid. It starts there. And so
be not her maid.
There are two different ways that thought can be divided. And there are different versions, like the folio is one way, the quarto is the other way. And there is no right answer. So it's just really interesting to see what the actor wants to do with it. If it's be not her maid. Since she is envious, her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Or be not her maid, since she is envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it.
Yeah.
Right? Both are perfectly valid. And I love to leave that up to the actor.
That's the thing. There's no right answer. They're different. They're just different versions of the speech. And even something like the word envious that I really like is, and you know, going back to my process as well, just in terms of, you know, the word envious, and when I circled that word, and I, you know, when I look at arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, and, you know, and then you look at be not her mates, and she is envious, and you notice the difference in the syllables of envious and envious. To me, the choice that I made with that, and again, this is different for everybody, but the choice that I made with that is the word repeats, but kill the envious moon. You know, envious is not so important in that first sentence, but it damn sure is important in that last one, because he takes his sweet time talking about the word envious, right? And the first one is all instinct, it's all spontaneous, right? It's arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, you know. And the last one is he's formed the thought, and now he can really go to town on the moon, and he can say, be not her mates, because she is envious. And
I love that, because what came to mind is that Romeo, you're having a great time. Like, you know, you have these thoughts, these images come to you, but then you're like, ooh, I want to go back to that one because that one was really fun.
Yeah. I really like that word. I'm going to go back to that word, and now I'm going to know what to do with that word, you know? And so, you know, there's going to be different words that repeat as well. So I would also challenge you guys to see what words repeat, why they repeat, you know, what you can do differently the second time they're said, you know, have fun with it that way. Certainly in this case, it worked out with the syllables and stuff, but I don't know if you necessarily need to go that technical like I did in that particular example, but there is a reason, you know, why he repeats it. And so, you know, I decided to have fun the second time the word envious was used. So, yeah.
Here's a question from someone. This speech is so well known. How do you say it without being influenced by how other actors in movie versions or other productions of Romeo and Juliet have said it?
So when I am learning the speech, whether it be for like an audition or, you know, if I'm just doing the monologue for something in isolation, I do like to watch other performances and stuff just for inspiration. I don't necessarily copy them. I can never copy anybody's unique existence. You know, everybody's cadence is different. Everybody's words are different. Everybody, the way they carry themselves in their bodies is so entirely different. But I do watch for inspiration, because there's certain things that other actors do with the text that give you clues of like, oh, I never even thought about it that way. So I always do that. In a production, I stay away. While I'm in production, I don't look at any other actor or performances. I owe the director, you know, the vision that they intend. And so for me, it's about collaboration with the director, and also trying to find how it lives in my body. And so it's hard. It's hard not to get distracted by other ways. You know, it's hard not to get distracted by how, Ray Fiennes does it, in the National Theater in 1980 something or whatever. Like it's hard not to get distracted by those things because they're role models. I look up to them. And so as a young actor, you always learn from the people that are above you. And so I would say, yeah, the answer to the question is it's hard. I don't know if I've found an exact, science to sort of navigate it, but certainly I can tell you that learning it in isolation is different for me than being in production with it.
We have a bunch of questions about lines. So one is it hard to learn the lines? Another one is, do you like to learn the lines or play the play? And finally, have you messed up your lines?
First of all, yes. To that last question, yes. It happens all the time. But the key is to keep moving forward and pretend they never happen. But they always do. We're human. This is the part of acting that I love, is learning lines. I know there's all that stuff about, empathy and imbuing empathy and emotion and telling a story and stuff like that. But I just love the work. Like I love the repetition of it. I love the pacing back and forth, taking a long walk in a park with my headphones on and just repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. I like the workout aspect of it. It's my I call it the word gym. And so, for me, I love memorization. To me is not necessarily painstaking. Now, I'm not saying that I get it right because I don't. Definitely not. But get it right 100% of the time. But and certainly there might be some things you might forget here and there. I know with film and television, memorizing is a bit more lax because things always change very last minute on set. And so you have to be able to be open to new words and new sentences and stuff like that. So I don't really put too much pressure on myself to get it to be word perfect. But in a rehearsal process, at least for theater, because you have, about a month to rehearse and go through this stuff, I really make sure that I have my words perfect by the time we open. And so for me, memorization is about repetition. I never get tired of it. And there is no magic pill that you can take to memorize better or anything like that. It's about practice, and it's about just, constant nagging repetition till you get it.
I love that idea of the word gym.
Yeah.
And I love, because what comes to my mind is that it's it's kind of an embodied process. Like it's almost like the words are coming into your body and becoming a part of you.
Completely. And I'll give credit to Allison Matthews, our vocal coach. Mm-hmm. She's incredible. What she's made me realize over time is it's not just about this, right? It's about your entire body and how those words live in your entire body. And, of course, you do tons of word warm-ups and articulation exercises. And so I'd recommend before you guys even break down, go through the speech and even tape it and send it back to us and things like that. I think, try different articulation exercises. You can Google them and even YouTube them and just find a way to play with your mouth and release tension in your jaw. And what you'll find is you might not notice it the first time you do it, but certainly you'll notice the way you say certain words changes. There's just more air going through your body as well. We have so much, we collect so much tension here, all of us, day to day. And so just by opening that up and getting your mouth and tongue around words, repeatedly helps break open the possibilities that you have with the speech.
Someone's asked about your thoughts about the difference between acting on the stage and on film.
Yeah, they're very, they both have the same end result of telling the story, but the approach to telling the story is entirely different. Theater is much more chronological in order. So you have a character arc, you rehearse it, from scene one to the end of this and to the end of the play. So it's easier to sort of map up the character arc and carry the momentum from start to finish. The speech that Romeo has here is different from some of the speeches that come later, but because the way you rehearse it and the way you have the repetition and memorization and sort of the 8-hour rehearsal process day to day kind of preps you to get to that mindset from going from start to finish in order. Film and TV, your day one is you filming the most emotional scene of your life from episode 9, and then the last day is you filming the first introduction scene in episode 1. And so, the immediacy of the performance, they'll call action and you have to be able to deliver on cue. There is no leading up to, there is no working up towards, there is no, warming up towards. And so they're different skill sets, and my work on stage certainly trains me for film and TV, because it allows me to use my whole body. And so, I'm able to sort of deliver in that brief moment. But yeah, that's what's different about it, I would say, is it's on the day you're meant to do that. And of course, there's no real rehearsal for film and TV. They expect you to do all your homework at home, and you show up to set ready to go. There's no time to rehearse while you're on set. And so the luxury that you have with theater is at least you have some sort of rehearsal period where you get to, map it out from start to finish. But film and TV, you rarely even meet the actors that you're working with until the day of, where you have to perform. You're sort of in and out. So different skill sets, but
wow.
Yeah, same end goal.
Do you enjoy one more than the other, or are they just so different that
they're so different? They're so different. Theater is much more creatively fulfilling for me, I will say that. There's nothing that beats the energy, and that's why we all miss it so much, is just that energy of that live audience, and the immediate feedback that they give you. It just propels you to, and it's an actor's medium. It truly is. Once you're there on stage, you hold that space for 2 hours and 30 minutes, and it's yours. And there's nothing that beats that. And for film and TV, it's just slightly different, but it inspires me in different ways. But I would say theater for me is certainly most creatively fulfilling.
So I'm going to rephrase this question, because I don't want to pry into your personal life. So when you're called upon as an actor to do things like fall in love, how do you do that? How do you allow that to affect you in such a way that, it affects you professionally?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah, I think part of why I chose this vocation, and part of why I chose this profession, and part of why I was so passionate about it is I am a huge empath. I care to the extreme. I love to the extreme. I hate to the extreme. My sort of emotional sort of meter, I live on the extremes. And so I'm always this emotional live wire, and that's just what I've been since my childhood. And a lot of acting classes and stuff like that, what they do teach you is to, how to channel that properly. Right. Because if you do live in those extremes, you also do need therapy, to help with those things for sure. And in a professional work environment, it's important to know how to channel those properly, because you can't take up, while your scene partners are waiting, you can't just take up the whole space just crying for 2 hours. Otherwise nothing gets done. Right. And so it's important to know how to channel that properly. What was the question again? Sorry, I think I lost track of the.
Well, no, I'm curious about how you, as an actor, open your heart in such a way.
Yeah.
That is professional, and yeah.
I think I'm a very empathetic person by nature. So that part isn't too difficult, in the sense that I'm really connected to my emotional engine. And I think my training has sort of helped me channel that in a proper direction. And part of that is, I bring up substitution work. Part of that is writing a journal, writing diaries, writing about, who Juliet is in my personal life, right? Who she would be, what her image is, what she looks like. I certainly have a person in mind, and so, so for me, it's I use that really to quickly engage with the material. And I know for me, because I feel more tapped into my emotional engine than I ever have before, I'm able to sort of, conjoin the two right away. Certain scenes, I am not able to get there quickly. Certain scenes, I feel too vulnerable, where I want to push certain thoughts away and certain things in my past away, so I don't want to bring it up to surface. And that's where, coaches and your director helps, find a different way, a different angle. But it does take a lot out of you. I will say that. It's important when you're doing substitution work to have a healthy relationship to that substitution. Because then that way you're able to, once the work is done, you're able to put it aside. But over time, when you use that sort of method to get into your work, it does take a toll mentally, because you're talking about, you talk about Bard on the Beach, you talk about a performance, the entire length of the run, you're talking about a month and a half, 8 shows a week kind of thing. And that, that's a lot. And so you can't use up all your emotional resources, every single night. Otherwise, you're exhausted by the end of it. And so it's about properly figuring out and pacing yourself. And I'm able to luckily do it better than I have before. And so yeah.
I find in some ways it's the idea of falling in love is, yes, there's one aspect of romantic love. And, for example, in my case, I am madly in love with my husband, which is amazing. And I fall in love with the world every day. And that doesn't affect the love that I have for my husband. So that's kind of a spirit of it as well, that we all kind of fall in love a little bit here and there, all over the place. But anyway, here's a question. What if you have to play a role or personality you detest? How do you address playing someone who's so different from who you are?
Well, that's the challenge. That's why I love this craft so much. Is if I just played myself, it'd get really boring really quickly. So I think I welcome it. I embrace that challenge. But the key thing that I make sure I do is I don't judge the character. I, as Pranit, will never judge that character if I'm going to play him. Everybody has, I said right off the top, my process, it's given circumstances, right? About the who, what, where, when, why, how. And those central questions inform all our lives. And if it's a person I detest, there's a good reason why I might detest them. But if I'm playing them, I have to understand them. I have to understand where they're coming from. I have to understand their given circumstances. Eventually, that becomes my given circumstances. But I certainly don't judge them. And I can't. If I'm going to do an honest portrayal of a person that I detest, of a character that I detest, I have to understand their history and understand why they became the way they became. People don't come out of the womb fully formed human beings. They whether it's by nature or nurture, they become the way they are. And so it's my job as an actor to understand the why behind that. And I don't judge it. And frankly, I find it fun because that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, it expands and stretches our sense of humanity and helps us understand.
Exactly.
So the final, it's more of a comment than a question, but it brings us back to the speech from an attendee who says, this speech seems like the flip of the gallop apace speech from Juliet. In this speech, Romeo sees Juliet as the sun, while in gallop apace, Juliet sees Romeo as the knight and wants people to pay no worship to the garish sun. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously there's I didn't even, first of all, great observation, because that didn't even come into my head right away. But yeah, I think there is a contrast there for sure. I certainly in terms of character archetypes, one is a bit more, Juliet feels a bit more grounded to me, or more steeped in her tradition to me than a Romeo who is trying to find a way to break out a little bit. And instinctually, from your gut, what that does to a person is different. So you look at that gallop apace speech versus this speech. One is there's certainly a different rhythm to that one, whereas this one is much more, at least to me, it's much more instinctual, and it's much more. I don't know what the right word is, but he's unable to sort of contain himself. He lives sort of here. His passion is through the roof, and so yeah, I mean, it's a good observation. I something to keep in mind for sure.
Do you have any last words of advice for our participants as they make this speech their own?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I keep coming back to it, is make it your own. Find a way to figure out why the speech is personal to you. In particular about this, go back to, you being the shy kid that has a crush, on someone, and figure out, what those emotions were, what that emotion that you felt, that intoxicating sort of feeling of never being able to not ever stop thinking about them, you go to sleep thinking about them, you wake up thinking about them, you're not able to sit and focus on work because you're always thinking about them. That feeling, we've all gone through it, because we're human beings. And so, I would just say, as a last word, find a way to make it personal to you. And the more hyper specific you are to events that have happened in your own life, the more universal it is for the rest of us, the more we'll get it, and the more we'll empathize, and the more we'll have fun watching you tackle the speech. So yeah, I think that's the sort of the biggest piece of advice I could give.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Pranit, thank you so much. It's been so much fun talking with you, and I'm so grateful that you've given us this time.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And a reminder to our attendees, please join us for the working session next week, and please share your speeches with us because it brings us so much joy. And keep an eye on our website, our channels, your emails, social media, all of that jazz, because Speech of the Week will come back in early 2021, and we will keep you posted. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.